Dan vs. may be coming back. Keep watching to find out how you can help. Maybe it's just me, but the 2010s felt like a boom for animated shows. Not only was there a ton of quality content, but the internet really allowed for a lot of fan communities to flourish. So many shows became massive hits that are still well loved today. Adventure Time, Regular Show, Gravity Falls, Gumball, Steven Universe, Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman. So many well-loved shows aired in the 2010s, but there's one I feel deserved way more love than it got. And if you've been watching me for a while, you might already know what it is. Dan vs. is a really strange show. It centers around a misanthropic man-child with serious anger issues who vows to take revenge on anything he feels has wronged him. The episodes usually follow a pretty consistent structure. Dan has something wrong him in the cold open, which will prompt him to seek revenge on it for the rest of the episode. He'll rope his best friend Chris into helping him out, and Chris's wife Elise might do something too. Sometimes she'll tag along for the ride, sometimes she'll have her own plot that intertwines with Dan and Chris's, and sometimes she'll just be there for a couple of jokes. It really depends on the episode. Dan attempts a couple of harebrained schemes to get revenge until he pulls off a big one that succeeds in the end. At least, that's how most episodes go. There are a few episodes that deviate from the formula, and those tend to either be some of the best or some of the worst episodes of the show. Dan vs. is mostly episodic, but has the occasional continuity nod, such as a character returning or the show referencing the aftermath of one of Dan's previous schemes. The cast is surprisingly small, with only 3 main characters to speak of. Luckily, they went for quality over quantity here. Starting with Dan, he's a character I absolutely loved when I first saw this show, and he's still pretty great. Not only is Dan an incredibly angry guy, he's also very in his own world. He's childish and very conspiratorial, often coming out with insane ideas about the people he's up against, and even crazier plans to take them down. Despite Dan's obvious flaws, he's shown to have a lot of positive qualities too, like a strong sense of justice, a ton of ingenuity, despite all that brain power going towards something basically pointless, and even a soft side, helping people along his journeys, having a love for his cat Mr. Mumbles, and even being shown to care about Chris despite taking advantage of him in literally every episode. Speaking of Chris, he serves as the perfect contrast to Dan. Instead of living alone in a derelict apartment, he lives in a nice house with his loving wife. Instead of constantly being angry, he's usually calm and friendly, and instead of being headstrong and never backing down even when it makes sense to, he's a massive pushover. While he occasionally teams up with Dan because he legitimately believes in the cause, he usually does it because Dan's able to strong-arm him into it. His interactions with Dan are the meat and potatoes of this show's comedy. They play off each other really well. Chris obviously serves as the straight man to Dan's intense anger, absurd conspiracies, and general ignorance of basic things. But Chris isn't some beacon of knowledge and reason. Dan serves as a voice of reason for Chris when it comes to things like his lack of confidence, lack of knowledge in more obscure areas, and his general gluttony. This dynamic works really well. They always play off each other in really funny ways, and underneath all that bickering, you can tell they still care about each other. Finally, we get to Elise. She's Chris's wife and seems like she'd be the most normal of the bunch, but not really. Imagine if Kim Possible grew up and started working for an even shadier version of the CIA, and you get Elise. While Dan and Chris could likely carry the show on their own, Elise adds a nice bit of variety to the mix. Sometimes she'll be on a mission that interacts with Dan's revenge quest in some way, and sometimes she'll just be in a regular domestic situation and bring her spy knowledge into it. She can be pretty funny, both with all the things she's threatened to do to Dan, or really anyone that hurts Chris, and with her constantly hiding her true career from her husband. Now, hearing the descriptions of Chris and Elise, you might notice a familiar trope popping up. You know, the typical cartoon couple of the fat, lazy husband and the wife who's too good for him, and you spend the entire show wondering why they're together. Well, they managed to sidestep that pretty well here. There aren't any episodes solely dedicated to their relationship, but they do get plenty of screen time together. And despite their issues, you do really get the feeling they love each other. Her relationship with Dan is also kind of interesting. While she usually sees him as a pest and is threatened to do unspeakable things to him, there are plenty of times where she sympathizes with him, and she's helped him out with a good deal of revenge plots. And that's pretty much it as far as characters go. There's also Mr. Mumbles, who's just Dan's cat, Elise's parents, who only show up in a few episodes, and a bunch of memorable one-off characters. Another main draw of the show is that despite Dan doing doing some pretty horrible things, it does a good job of making you sympathize with him. There are a few targets of his that are kinda random, like George Washington or Canada, where the episode is mostly carried by Dan just being really entertaining, but there's usually something else. Plenty of episodes of entertaining villains, or of Dan being understandably wronged. And of course, there's when the targets get a bit more relatable. Traffic, planned obsolescence, fancy restaurants. Dan targets so many common fixtures of modern life, giving the viewer an outlet for revenge fantasies against all the little annoyances of the modern world. The show often satirizes the targets Dan goes after. How clever the satire is really depends on the episode. While there's a lot of good stuff about this show, there are a few downsides. Sure, there's the occasional bad episode, particularly in the later seasons, but I'm talking about consistent issues. There are two major overarching problems with Dan Versus, one of which is probably what wound up killing it. Starting with the more minor issue, we have the animation. The character designs and the backgrounds look good, the movements, not so much. It's no secret this was done in Flash, and it shows. The movements are really awkward. Granted, they're able to work around it pretty well. Since most of the comedy's dialogue-based, you don't need to put too much focus on the movement, and they were able to work within their limitations to make some good action scenes. But there are still plenty of scenes where the movement feels unnatural, and it can get really distracting. Then there's the issue that held the show back in a much bigger way. From my description so far, what network do you think the show aired on? Adult Swim? Maybe Fox? Nope, it was on the Hub. Yes, this show about an angry lunatic tearing apart the annoyances of the modern world in a satirically sadistic fashion not only aired on the same channel as My Little Pony, but flat out had ads of Dan getting into fights with Pinkie Pie. And this was the show's biggest problem. It had an identity crisis. It was technically okay for kids to watch. It didn't have any swearing, nudity, or graphic violence, so that means it's a kid's show, right? Well, literally the first joke in the show is about the IRS. Dan is all but confirmed to have killed people, and Elise has done way worse. It's insane the amount of stuff this show has gotten away with. Sure, maybe this on its own wasn't enough to kill the show. After all, regular show came out around the same time, treaded that same line, and had a long, fruitful run on Cartoon Network. At the same time, though, it fit in with the other programming there. Adventure Time was already airing and wasn't too different from regular show. Pretty much the only thing Dan Versus and MLP have in common is the Flash animation. Also, it didn't help that MLP was such a hit, it essentially buried the show in the schedule, pretty much dooming it to failure. So now I bet you're wondering why the hell I'm talking about Dan Versus. Am I going to start doing TV reviews? No, don't worry, I'm sticking with video games. I'm doing this because the show's creators still have the rights and are in talks to bring the show back. A couple months ago, Captain Jerk, the de facto leader of the fandom, made arrangements with the relevant staff after doing several interviews with Chris and confirming the owner of the rights, and has been behind the scenes gathering fandom opinion and checking interest for months now. He's the one organizing this massive collab, including the videos on both his channel and Josh Scorcher's, which you can watch right now. To support the creators, like and share this video and the others I mentioned as much as possible. Share the hashtag DanVersusRevival on Twitter, and join the Dan Versus Fandom Core linked in the description. Most importantly, the message board, where you can meet and talk to the show's co-creator Christopher Pearson himself, along with the DeviantArt group and Dan Versus Discord. All linked below. Now that the advertising's out of the way, allow me to give 3 things I'd like to see in an updated Dan Versus, and why I think this is a perfect show to give a second life. For starters, there's the animation. I don't claim to be an expert in this, but I'm pretty sure computer animation's come a long way in the past decade. It's to the point where Flash isn't even the industry standard anymore. As a result, a new Dan Versus could probably look a lot better. It doesn't have to look amazing. After all, this is still a mostly dialogue-based show. I'd just like to see them paper over some of the more awkward elements. Like, if the animation quality is on a similar level to BoJack Horseman, I think we'll be good. Second, I want a higher age rating. Dan Versus was basically for adults in all but official ratings, so why not go all the way? I don't want it to be super edgy or anything, but I would like them to have more freedom with the subjects they can tackle and the jokes jokes they can make. I mean, if Samurai Jack did it, why can't Dan Versus? Finally, the biggest reason to bring Dan Versus back is all the new stories they can tell. Like I said, a major focus of the show is riffing on the idiocies of the modern world and providing a revenge fantasy tearing into them. Think about how much the world has changed in the last decade and all the new targets Dan could have. I'm not saying I want to see Dan try to kidnap Donald Trump or infect LA with you-know-what, but there are tons of things they can work with. The proliferation of social media, increased political polarization, social media influencers, rideshare apps, the rise of fake news and or distrust in the media, anti-vaxxers and flat earthers, 3D printing. None of these topics existed, or at least weren't nearly as relevant when the original show aired, and the writers could have a field day with any one of them, let alone all of them. And those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. There's dozens more crazy things that have happened between then and now. I am Defoffalizer, and the world is getting increasingly angry, and more than ever, people need an outlet for that anger. I believe Dan Versus can be that outlet.